Okay. So I'm just going to get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for taking time out of your what I know to be busy schedules to join us this morning for this conversation that we're going to have around the proposed gross receipts tax that could potentially be on the November 2020 ballot. I'll quickly introduce myself, and then I have a colleague that will introduce himself. My name is LaShonda White. I am the Acting Deputy City Manager for Internal Services. I'm from Richmond and born and raised here. Have a lot of pride for the city. Been working for the city for almost 15 years in the city manager's office, and it just continues to be a privilege to work for the city and support the residents and businesses that are here. Antonio, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Antonio Banuelos. I work in the finance department as the accounting manager. I worked for the city over 25 years, and also born and raised in Richmond, currently live in Richmond.
All right. We had another staff person that unfortunately is unable to attend today, but I do want to mention him by name. His name is James Atencio. He is the city attorney that helped draft the ordinance. Unfortunately, he can't be on this call this morning, but he will be present at the city council meeting tonight. And there might be times where we feel like we want to wait for a city attorney response to any of your questions. And so we'll let you know if that's the case, and then we can respond to them either tonight during council, or we will provide answers via a frequently asked questions page on our city website. All right. So the agenda for today is posted, and the purpose of the meeting is first and foremost to provide information on this proposed ballot measure regarding gross receipts tax. But we also want to make sure we answer your questions and then allow you as the business community and other stakeholders to provide us with feedback, ways in which we can strengthen this ordinance, things that we need to do in terms of better outreach. We're here to listen, and we want to provide information, but we want to listen also. And we will be taking some notes, making sure we are accurately recording your questions, your comments, and your concerns. So we won't have time to do introductions for everyone on the call to be able to introduce themselves, but if you would like, you can use the chat function. So some Zoom logistics, everyone is muted upon entering. If you do want to speak, you can raise your virtual hand. And once it's time for the question and answer section, we will unmute you and allow you to speak in the way in which you just saw Ms. Ruck be able to do. And you can also use the chat feature. So there's a chat feature, and it allows you to provide comments, ask questions. These could be comments you just want us to record, and we will be recording all the chat. It could be that you have a question that you don't want to verbalize on this call, but you want us to answer later. So feel free to use that chat function. But you also can use the chat function right now if you want to introduce yourself to the others on the call by stating your name and the name of your business or organization that you're with. You don't have to do that, but feel free to introduce yourself via chat. All right, Antonio, you can go to the next one. So before I turn the presentation over to Antonio, I wanted to just provide a little bit of background on where we are and why we're here today. So if any of you have been following the city's budget process, not only this current year, as we develop the fiscal year 2021 budget, but in past years, you will know that the city has a structurally imbalanced budget. And that means our expenditures are higher than our revenues. And we as a city have been really trying to find ways to address that structurally imbalanced budget. This year we have adopted a balanced budget, but it doesn't address the structural issues. So what we need to do as a city is focus on both increasing revenues as well as reducing expenditures. Part of increasing our revenue is really, part of that has been centered around looking at a variety of revenue enhancing measures. The city has presented to City Council a list of revenue enhancement measures. One of those includes bringing ballot measures or measures to our residents for voting. to increase our revenues. And so that is part, of what we're bringing forth to you today. So the city was thinking about all the different ways in which we could increase revenue. And we began working with a group called Lift Up Richmond in April of 2020. And they also, Lift Up Richmond is a coalition that consists of a number of our bargaining units in the city. So SEIU Local 21, the Richmond Police Officers Association, a Local 188 Fire, Local 21, and then some nonprofit organizations such as RISE, ACE, and APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, and then other community and labor advocates. So they were already working really in parallel to the city. As we're thinking about revenue enhancement measures, they were also thinking about revenue enhancement measures. And so they had come together to think about crafting some ballot language and looking at different revenue enhancement measures that we could place on the ballot. So, once we realized we're both working in parallel, we decided to join forces and work together. And the coalition, and I know some of them are on the call today, and I want to thank them for their time. They were able to actually hire a consultant and hire a firm to do polling to look at various measures. So they were already actually a little bit ahead of us. And so instead of the city trying to do polling, another group doing polling, that really doesn't work. So the city joined forces with Lift Up Richmond, and they did polling of over 400 residents or voters, potential Richmond voters, between June 16th and June 23rd. And they asked about 3 different measures, so not just gross receipts. One was gross receipts, one was a vacant parcel tax, and one was a documentary transfer tax. They all polled well. Gross receipts polled the best, and so there was a decision to move forward in that with that one and place something on the ballot. So if you heard me say that the polling ended in late June, once we realized gross receipts actually polled well, it didn't give staff a lot of time, ideal amount of time to do the outreach that we would have wanted to do, to have conversations with the business community in the way in which we would have wanted to. And we were asked to bring something to City Council for their consideration. And we did that as soon as feasibly possible, which was that July 21st City Council meeting. And that meeting was to present potential ballot language, present an ordinance to the City Council, so that they could see it first, so that they could see it and tell us what direction they wanted us to move in, what direction they wanted us to move, whether that be don't move forward or bring it back to us for consideration. So at that meeting, July 21st, some of the council members expressed the need for city staff to engage the business community. And as I stated, it really was never our intention not to. It just was the timing didn't allow for what we would have wanted to naturally do. So I do apologize for that. And so we have tried in a very short amount of time, and I acknowledge that it's not the sufficient amount of time to engage the business community. We met with initially the Council of Industries as well as the Chamber and some reps on Friday, so last Tuesday, and then we were able to pull together a meeting on Friday just to have some initial conversations. And then we also have scheduled this meeting to provide additional stakeholders, those in the business community, to provide feedback. I feel like I can't say enough that we really do honor and respect our business community and are really interested in hearing your feedback so that we can provide what it is you say to the City Council tonight. And that is what our plan is. So we will be presenting. And Antonio, if you don't mind, just quickly going to the next slide. Tonight at City Council, 6:30, and please provide comments. And I know many of you have already done that. This is the recommended action that is being taken, and this is based on the direction we received last Tuesday night. They asked us to bring the item back for consideration. And so that's what we're doing. They can either adopt tonight based on this action, or they can provide us direction to do further revisions to the draft based on comments received from business community or whatever their ideas are. And if they really wanted to go on the November 3rd ballot, they would have to schedule a special meeting to approve this ballot measure approve a resolution, and that would be sometime before August 7th, which is when this has to be on the agenda. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background. I've seen that there are a few comments, and we can try and address some of those issues when we have time for Q&A. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Antonio and let him continue with the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, LaShonda. So just to reiterate, tonight the City Council has a couple of options. They can either say yes or no to the resolution placing the item to the ballot, the November ballot, or they can provide direction to staff to come back August 4th. Okay. Let me first go over a gross receipts overview. The financial impact, it's estimated that new revenue would be generated about $4.9 million. That's on top of the amount we currently receive of about $3 million for business license tax. Any new revenue will not be received until fiscal year 21-22. So for most business licenses, they expire around December 31st. So next year, December 31st, 2021 would be the first renewal notice with the new methodology. So, and that wouldn't be due until probably the spring of 2022. Okay. Some of the steps and costs to implement gross receipts if approved by the voters. Obviously, you have election costs. That's a one-time fee around $10,000. We have to look at our software, so that could be an additional one-time spending of $60,000 to $100,000 if needed. We would definitely need additional staffing because this model is a lot more complicated and intensive than what we currently have. And of course, we need to do outreach and education of the new ordinance and what it affects and how it's implemented and what it means. So this is the proposed ballot language that will show up on the ballot if approved. This is the actual text that we're working on right now for the November 3rd ballot. The current business license model is based on number of employees with a base rate of $234.10. The rate goes up if you have employees, the first 25 at $46.80 per employee. And if you have above 25 employees, then each one above the 25 is a lower rate of $40.10. Some businesses currently do pay on gross receipts, including marijuana businesses at 5% of their gross receipts and movie theaters at 0.3% of their revenues above the $20,000. Currently, all business licenses expire on an anniversary basis. So if you get the license today, it expires a year from today. In the new model, it'll be everything is going to have to expire on December 31st. So when you process your gross receipts tax paperwork, it matches with what you submitted to the Franchise Tax Board and the IRS. So a December 31st deadline going forward, if approved. Let me go more into the gross receipts model. It's a progressive tax based on the size of the business. It has several categories, so different rates for different types of businesses. Most businesses under $250,000 gross receipts will pay a base rate of $100 per year. So that would be, if they're paying $234.10, so it would be a reduction down to $100. Exemptions are currently included in the ordinance. And council has the flexibility to decrease rates, change the start date, and add more exemptions. Most implementation issues can be addressed by city council, by regulations, or by interpretations on their part. This is an updated gross receipts model chart. Here I try to capture how you would look at where you fall. So first thing you would have to determine if you're a business is what class are you in. Next part would be how much gross receipts you recorded in the year in question. So say, for example, you have $3 million and you have a store, your retail sales. So the first part of that would be the base rate of $2,250. You start off with there. And since you're at 3 million, you pay 0.135% of anything above the 2.5 million. So 2,250 plus the result of 500,000 times 135%. Okay. The more interesting part is trying to determine which class each business falls in. That's probably most of the questions we're going to have, a lot of the questions at least. So that's the part of the model that's really changing. Too many screens here. is this bottom part of the chart. And this corresponds to the rental properties. Current model proposes we charge all gross receipts for all residential property at 1.395%. For rental property, there's no small business. Every rental property gets charged this rate. For cannabis businesses, no change here. They're still getting charged at 5%. This chart corresponds to the revenue assumptions generated using this model. So I looked at all the businesses in Richmond, tried to make an estimate on where they would fall in. For the last tier, I included all the businesses above 2.5 million. So this includes a tier from 2.5 to 25, from 25 to 50, and above 50. I didn't want to, since the higher number you go, the less businesses are in there, so I didn't want to provide that sort of information. So here's a summary of that. Most of the revenue comes from the businesses above 2.5 million. For the businesses between 0 and 1 million, a good chunk of those is actually anyone under 250,000, they would pay the $100 charge. The biggest impact to the revenue would be the residential property. This would raise 4.5 million. Currently from rental property, we're close to 1.6 million, I believe. Okay, some issues that we had that came to light during the council meeting, we had some ordinance issues. So the rates weren't included in the ordinance posted in SIRE for the 7/21 meeting. The new rates are included in the ordinance. So at the last meeting, we had different rates in the ordinance and different rates in the agenda report and the chart that was provided as an attachment. That has been corrected now. Part of the issue was also the different number of classes. The previous ordinance had more classes than we have right now. This one is a more concise listing of classes. The previous one had 11 business classes, and this one, I'm sorry, the updated has 11 classes, the previous one had 15. Additionally, any other issues that we see going forward that can be addressed by city council regulations and interpretations as mentioned earlier. Again, this is more of a detail of what we had in the 7/21 meeting last week. Those are the rates that were included in the ordinance at the top. The bottom are the updated classes and rates that are included in the ordinance that's in SIRE tonight and will be presented to City Council tonight. As you can see, some of the changes are significant, especially in the category for over 50 million. And this presentation will be posted tonight at in the city's finance webpage. Yeah, I think I'm going to hand it back to LaShonda right now. And you're muted.
Thank you. So this is just and thank you, Antonio, for the overview of where we are and what the gross receipts tax could look like. In terms of what we have been able to do, as I stated, we met with reps from the Council of Industries and the Chamber on Friday. We are right now hosting this virtual community meeting. And as stated, we will take any comments, questions, and provide feedback to City Council during our presentation tonight. So we want to be really transparent and make sure we are hearing those questions and concerns, and sharing those with our decision makers. We have posted the information on the draft ordinance, PowerPoint presentations on our website, and we, there will be a City Council meeting tonight, starting at 6:30. The item doesn't come up at 6:30, but if you go to our city's website, there are ways in which you can provide comment or be able to speak tonight on this item when it comes up. Once again, we do acknowledge that, a week time has not been nearly sufficient to get all the comments. So we thank you again for your time. Next slide. So we already went over what the council, what the recommended action is tonight for City Council. Council can do one of either of these things, take either of these actions, or they can take an action that is completely different than that and make a decision not to place something on the ballot. So that really is up to them as decision makers. And in terms of a timeline, if it does get placed on the ballot for November, these are the dates that are important for us. The last day to place the measure on the ballot is August 7th, which is the reason for a lot of the deadlines and when we had to bring things to City Council. So technically tonight is the last City Council meeting, unless Council makes a decision to have a special meeting sometime in August or later this week or sometime in August. But we have to make sure if this goes on that that we do it by August 7th. The last day to amend or withdraw a measure once it's placed on the ballot is August 12th. Impartial analyses are due August 14th. If you want to file primary arguments, they are due August 19th. And then, of course, Election Day is November 3rd. And with that, that concludes our brief presentation. And we have an hour to answer any questions that we can. I do want to remind everyone that our city attorney who helped draft the ordinance is unable to be on this call. So we will do our best to answer questions, but do reserve the right to refrain from answering some if we feel like we want to get you the most accurate answer and we need an attorney to help us draft that response. And we also want to hear, are there, if there's questions, if there's comments, ways in which things that you think are actually beneficial in a gross receipts tax, or if you have comments around the progressive nature of the tax, the rates. We want to hear every and anything, additional community outreach, anything you have to share with us, we want to capture it. So with that, I see there's a bunch of questions and comments, and I actually will start with some of those first.
LaShonda, should I stop sharing the screen so we can see more people on the?
Sure. All right, so let's take some of these. So thank you to those initially who introduced themselves. One of the first questions were, why were no business groups invited to participate? They, after all, would pay the proposed tax. You could have invited the business groups in April, and I believe that's in reference to when I was sharing that the Lift Up Richmond Coalition was working and figuring out, as well as the city, figuring out what types of ballot measures we could place on the ballot. And so to answer that question, on the city side, I think there are people from Lift Up Richmond here. If they want to speak, please raise your hand and David will unmute you. But we do agree, the business community is the group that is impacted by a gross receipts tax measure. And we were really waiting to see what the polling of potential voters would look like for not only this ballot measure, but others. And so the timing, and unfortunately there's not much I can say except for I understand, I agree, we could have done better. And we are now trying to do some of that outreach. And I don't know, David, if anyone asked to speak, they could be unmuted. I can't tell.
Yes, Hari. Kristen, sorry, did you have your hand raised?
And I think Kristen's from Lift Up Richmond.
Hi, Kristen. Sorry, I unmuted you right now.
Thanks, David. I'll just add, I'm with IFPT Local 21, the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, Local 21. And part of our thinking behind the way that the measure is also structured is that council does have the flexibility to adjust rates if necessary, and that there's the flexibility to delay implementation of the tax till 2022. And that part of that is also to have an ongoing dialogue in order to get business community input and make sure that these rates are right for Richmond. So I just wanted to add that as well, that there is, what passes in November is not final. Council has the ability to adjust the rates downwards. They do not have the ability to adjust the rates upwards after it passes.
Thank you for that. And I know Antonio talked about that, but we did build in flexibility, understanding that the timing was not ideal, that we did build in flexibility. So there is, as I stated earlier, a need to find ways to increase revenue for the city. One of these ways is to have ballot measures and look at things that can help our structural deficit. And so this is where some of our unions got together and were very creative and thoughtful about what types of measures could be placed on the ballot. So we thank them for that work. But because I think we understood the timing and how we were up against deadlines, there is a lot of flexibility built into the measure. And just to repeat, council does have the flexibility to push back the start date, the implementation date of the measure. They have the flexibility to adjust rates downward. So what would go to the voters is a cap on the rates, and then they could adjust them downwards for different categories. And then also, if I'm not mistaken, they have the ability to add exemptions. They can't remove exemptions once it goes, but they can add additional exemptions for additional categories or businesses. So there is some flexibility there. And as stated, that was built in because we do understand the timing was not ideal, and we didn't have the sufficient time to do the outreach. And so we would continue, if council places on the ballot in November, we would continue to engage the business community and do the outreach necessary to make sure the ordinance was right if it was placed on November. All right, so that was that question. And there were some people who agreed with Joshua Ginzer, who posed that question. Let's see. So the question about why were we not polled, I think we, we're not honoring and respecting the business community since this is the first time you heard of it. And we understand that and want to continue to have conversations. This will not be the first or the last. This will not be the last, conversation that we want to have with the business community, regardless of what the council decision is made, if it gets placed on the ballot or not in November. A question about how are the rates in the proposed new ordinance established? They seem arbitrary. Can you, Kristen, also talk about that? David, can you unmute Kristen? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sure. So the rates that are proposed right now, and again, there's flexibility to adjust these rates, but the thinking behind them, the sort of rationale is that at the lower end of the scale of the marginal tax rates, they're benchmarked to be close to what currently exists in Oakland and Berkeley, both of which have a gross receipts tax system. And then the system is modeled, though it is slightly different, but it's modeled after an existing practice that's been in place in San Francisco since about 2012, where they have marginal rates that increase as a business's gross receipts increase. And also there are not marginal rates for the residential rentals, but that system that is proposed is what is currently used in Oakland, and also captures some of the types of exemptions for owner-occupied residential units that are currently in place in Oakland as well. Although I know there's some conversation about whether or not there should be marginal rates as well for large residential property owners who rent 5 or more units. But what's currently in the legislation is based off of Oakland's practice. Hopefully that answers the question, LaShonda.
Thank you for that. David, does anyone have their virtual hand up?
Yes, both Sean and Fred have had their hands up, and then I believe Sean was first, so I'll
Thank you.
mute him right now. Okay, Sean, you should be available.
Oh, hi. So I'm a little concerned because this is the first that we heard of this city council meeting or this ordinance. Yesterday, somebody forwarded me an email. As a license holder, you would think that there would be better outreach to the business community. It sounds like everybody but the business community has been in on this from the beginning with your alliances, but why are we just finding out about this now? That's my question.
Thank you for that. And we, as stated, we definitely understand that there has not been sufficient outreach to the business community or other interested or impacted stakeholders. So we acknowledge that. And, part of it was once we actually got started, we being the city, as well as the Lift Up Richmond Coalition, who they organize themselves. They are not part of the city. They organize themselves. They have members that are represented that work for the city because it's a union groups, but they organize themselves separate from the city, looking at different revenue measures and ballot measures. And so on the city side, I can't speak to the Lift Up Richmond side, but on the city side, we definitely were waiting to see what the outcome of the polling would be, to see what would even, what polled okay, what was feasible to even think about and place on the ballot. And so there just wasn't sufficient timing that we provided ourselves to be able to do the work that we needed to do. I really don't have a better answer than that, unfortunately. And so we're trying to engage now.
Okay, so why don't you stop the process where you are, poll the businesses, and postpone your city council meeting? This shouldn't even be going to the city council yet. We should have a chance to be polled, to organize, and put our agenda forward, because it's going to look a little different. Mm-hmm. I don't mind paying my fair share, but I don't want to pay everybody's fair share.
Understood.
And I think that's what I'm hearing from the other business owners, is we're just finding out about this. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest that this not be on the city council's agenda until businesses have had a chance to be polled and say their piece, and then you have accurate information. Right now, you just have Richmond residents who, of course, don't want to pay. They see us as being able to pay their tax potentially. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that no increases. I mean, there's probably a fair place to land somewhere in there, but it doesn't seem like this is the right way to do it. And we're not Oakland's, Berkeley, or San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Those cities offer very different, they offer very different things than Richmond does. So you can't base your tax on what they charge. The services are like apples and oranges, I think. Mm-hmm. And that's it. I would just like an opportunity for the business community to be heard before this moves any further. That's it.
I really thank you for your comment, and we definitely have heard that in written form from not only the Chamber and the Council of Industries. We have seen other businesses provide feedback directly to the City Council, and so I encourage you to, we're going to share comments tonight as stated, because we want to be transparent about what we heard today. I know Council has been receiving letters and emails. There is an opportunity for businesses and those impacted to speak directly to Council or share their feedback. And so I really encourage you to do that. What we did with the timing that we had was quickly turn around after the polling was done, a draft ordinance for Council to consider. And that was just last week. That was the earliest we could do that. And that was because we were asked to bring something forward to City Council. And at that moment, we asked them for direction. What is it that you want us to do? We got direction last week to bring it back tonight. And so Council can make a decision. It's already on the agenda, but Council has the authority, ability to, as in Oakland and other places, to pull it off, to hold off. So they have different options available to them, and that's something that the Council will have to, that's a decision the Council will have to make collectively tonight. But we definitely hear and understand, and a lot of the comments that are coming up are stating the same thing. It feels rushed. So I'm acknowledging that people believe we are rushing this ballot measure, that there hasn't been enough time to get the input and the authentic engagement of the business community, like you said, to understand where we can land that actually works for the city as well as the business community. So there hasn't been that amount of time for feedback. So we hear that. That there just hasn't been time to even learn that this is going on the agenda. So we acknowledge and respectfully accept all of those comments, and thank you for sharing.
So how do you think that's going to affect attendance tonight at the City Council meeting from the business community, since we're just finding out about this yesterday, a lot of us? I mean, some people don't even know that they should go to the City Council meeting.
I understand.
So it sounds like it's stacked against us already.
Definitely understand that. And I know once we brought it forward to City Council on the 21st, the things that we did within our available means was, we posted it on our social media. We connected with all of the business associations that we know about. So 23rd Street Merchants Association, Council of Industry, Chamber of Commerce, Richmond Main Street, Point Richmond Business Association, to ask them to help say that again?
Did you send, so you have everybody's address based on their business license. Did you send out notices? I didn't get
mailers. So unfortunately, once again, we're back to the timing piece. To craft a mailer and send it out in time for it to have gotten to businesses or business owners before tonight would have been cutting it short. So like I said, we used what we had available to us to try and get the word out. Social media, city manager's weekly report, seeing if the mayor can push it out in his e-forums, sending it to the business associations. We agree that there definitely is additional outreach that still can be done regardless of what the city council decision is tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. David, did you say someone else had their hand up?
Yes, both Fred and now Rich have their hand up. I will now unmute Fred.
Thank you. First a comment, then a question. 400 people out of a city of 120 to 30,000 is not even really a representative sampling of the community. You're not even 1% to respond, let alone the businesses, the people who are being impacted. And I'm probably a little older than most of the people out there. And in school, during our history lessons, one of the bases for the Constitution was no taxation without representation. So obviously this is moving fast and furious, and the feeling that it's jammed down our throats is of a concern. My question to you, however, is what was you anticipated what the earnings income, the income increase would be due to the taxation. What do you think that is going to be impacted by the number of businesses who may leave Richmond and potential lawsuits against the city?
Those are good questions, and I don't know that I know the full answer to that. Honestly, I don't know. Number one, we don't know that it's going to be placed on the ballot. We don't know, even if a decision was made to place it on the ballot, what additional conversations we would be having with the business community and direction we would receive from the city council to make changes. So what would go, based on what you've seen in the ordinance, what would go is as we stated, the top rate. The council still has flexibility to reduce those rates. Council still has flexibility to change implementation date, to provide additional time necessary to engage the business community to come to that, as stated, as earlier shared, that middle ground that could work for both the business community to pay what the gentleman before you stated as, their fair share. So there's still opportunities. We could add additional exemptions. So there's still opportunities that the ordinance in which you have in front of you would not be the ordinance or would not be what was actually implemented at the end of the day. So, and don't know, can't fully answer, your question, but that is why we do think it is important. Our council thinks it's important, even though we didn't have a lot of time initially, to still engage the business community to make sure we get to a place that works.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, the next question is from Rich, who had their hands up. And Rich, I will unmute you right now.
Okay, thank you. LaShonda, thanks for the presentation. Lysandra, I have a few questions. I'll keep them short. I think you opened up saying that there's going to be some cost reductions as well as this revenue generation. Am I saying that right?
So what I stated was, in order for the city to address its structurally unbalanced budget, we have to look at both sides, revenue, which means increasing our revenue, as well as expenditure. So as a city, we're looking at both expenditure reductions as well as revenue enhancements.
Sure, just like we all have to in our personal budgets and our business budgets. So because this is aggressively being pursued on the revenue generation side, what is being aggressively pursued on the cost reduction side?
That's a good question. Antonio or Belinda, I don't know who else is on the line from finance. They want to chime in. But we have, the city started the budget for fiscal year 2021 with almost a $30 million deficit. And all of we are now down, we adopted a balance, the council adopted a balanced budget on June 30th. There was a placeholder in there for accommodations with unions. So we're working with our unions and we're in negotiations right now to see if we can get $3 million in accommodations from our unions. But setting aside that, the other $26.5 million really came from reductions in expenditures. So looking at, we froze a number of 58 positions that we are not hiring for right now. We looked at, each department looked really closely at their budgets to reduce expenditures, whether that be around professional services and contracts and other things. So we have, done work internally looking at our individual budgets. We've also used a small portion of our reserves just to help bring down our deficit. So we've done a lot of one-time fixes. About 60% of the $29 million reduction came from one-time fixes. We were able to make one-time reductions for the current for that one fiscal year, but it still doesn't get to our structural issue. But so those are some.
I think, I think LaShondra, trying to get at is that this is a long-term.
It is.
Permanent, tax that you want to implement on us. Mm-hmm. What is the reciprocal long-term cost reduction? Not one time, but long time. It needs to be balanced, just like you have said, it's a balanced approach. I'm not seeing the balance. I know you guys are working on the deficit, and I appreciate it. We all have to work on that. And maybe I missed it somewhere in publications, but I didn't see how that was all being, 58 positions is not millions of dollars. Anyway, I don't know where all those significant long-term budget impacts are going to come on the cost equation. It's easier to raise revenue from people like us than it is to cost, as we all know, to reduce costs. But that's my concern, that it's not balanced.
I hear you. And we as a city are really trying to find ways to structurally balance our budget, which means we have to look at long-term solutions to expenditure reductions, as well as long-term solutions to revenue enhancements. And
I think you'd get more respect from the business community if there was an aggressive plan being presented at the exact same time to say we're asking the business community to put 4.9 million out, but we are also have another plan to reduce expenditures by 4.9 million long-term or whatever it is.
I hear you. I understand.
We'll get more respect that way.
Understood.
Yeah. I think the last thing I just have to say is I know someone had said, why are we being compared to Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley? I think there's other communities in the Bay Area, and I don't know what their rates are, that are similar to Richmond, like Martinez, Antioch, Compton. Is there a way to get those comparisons and to see how we measure up to what those businesses are being charged?
Antonio or someone else?
That is something we're working on. It's not ready yet, but we're definitely getting a comparison to other cities. Some in the Bay Area or in California in general, the majority of the business license tax is based on gross receipts. In West Contra Costa County, it's like a little nook where most of the business license tax is on employees, including Richmond, El Cerrito, San Pablo, I believe. Those are based on employees. Most everybody else is gross receipts or a combination of gross receipts and employees. Of course, the rates also vary from city to city. So we're looking to see if we can put something together.
Yeah, I think personally for our business, it's going to go from $1,900 to over $113,000. So the increase of $100,000 is the reason why we're emotionally charged here. It doesn't make sense, and it's kind of unfortunate it's going to be pushed through like this. Over. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate them.
Yes, we also have Joshua.
Okay.
His hand raised, and I'll unmute him right now.
Thank you, David.
Okay, Joshua, you should be available.
I can't hear anything. Am I the only one? Oh, there we go. Uh-oh.
All right.
There we go.
So one thing that's not covered in the ordinance is how to determine what the taxable gross receipts are. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say anything about how to determine that. So you have a business, for example, that has offices in Richmond and elsewhere. The business might be a multi-billion-dollar business, but the office in Richmond may never take any money in. Or how do you allocate the gross receipts of a business that is located both within and without Richmond to what's in Richmond? And shouldn't the ordinance say something about that?
Okay, I'll take that question. Definitely the ordinance should be clear on that. But as far as finance is concerned, we're only concerned about the revenue generated within Richmond. If it's an administrative headquarter, for example, the way they mentioned has an administrative office here in Richmond, but the actual revenue is generated somewhere else, it would fall under the administrative headquarter definition. In that case, the way it should be implemented is on gross payroll. I think the ordinance needs to be tweaked a little bit where that's clear. So for businesses that don't generate revenue but have people employed in Richmond, that's usually the way it's handled as an administrative headquarter and based instead of gross receipts, gross payroll.
But that's not in the ordinance now.
And that needs to be clarified, yes.
And it has to be clarified. Well,
Correct.
Now the city council then can't pass this ordinance to put on the November ballot if they're going to change and add something like that needs to be added, right?
Well, that's an example of a simple fix. For that category, instead of gross receipt, change the words to gross payroll. That's an easy fix.
But are you going to fix that before tonight?
So what I can state is I think people have shared various comments about things that need to be clarified in the ordinance, and this is where we are working with our city attorney, who actually couldn't be on this call, but we've looked at the list of recommendations, questions for clarification. We are working through those. And what can happen, just say if the council makes a decision tonight that they do want it to go on the ballot and they don't want to have another special meeting, we could read changes into the action tonight to say they approve the ordinance is written and they want to incorporate these changes. So we could do that as an option. Or the council, depending on what they hear, what direction they want to provide, they could tell us to go make additional changes, and then we come back in a special meeting with a revised ordinance that does incorporate changes. So there are opportunities to incorporate changes and clarifications into the ordinance. But we are working on many of those that have been provided to us already, and thank you to those who have looked at it and provided us with some comments and need for clarification. We're working with our city attorney on those. David, do you mind unmuting Belinda, just in case? She's our finance director. If she wants to make any comments, you can keep her unmuted, please. Mr. Ginzer, I'm sorry, was that your final question? Okay, thank you. Belinda, did you want to add anything for anything that's been stated so far?
I do want to add one comment. Someone did ask about what are we doing on the other side besides just the revenue generating piece. We have been speaking with council in regards to adopting or moving toward a structural balanced budget. One of the things we're going to be doing this year, starting in September, is going back to council every month to have these types of discussions to try to set priorities for the city, so that we can try to make sure that we can fund those priorities. There's going to be a lot of work, and as LaShonda said, We've done a lot of work. There were definitely a lot of frozen positions from departments. So there will be some service impact results from that, reductions. Departments were asked to review their budgets, to go through some of the contracts that we had. There were various things that we've done, but we still have a lot of work to do moving forward, and just to try to get on track with balancing and having a structurally balanced budget. So we will be having those discussions. You will be seeing us before council every month to have those kind of conversations, and we will be having community meetings as well to get your input and buy-in as we move forward.
I know we have a few people who've raised their hand, but I want to answer one or two questions from the chat. So I'm kind of go back and forth. One of those questions was about this Lift Up Richmond group. They said, why is a group not part of the city writing policy for the city? And then what's the payoff to Lift Up Richmond? How much are they paid for this? So I can start, but there might be someone who also wants to speak on that one. So Lift Up Richmond consists of unions that, the majority of it is unions that are part of the city in that sense, where their members are part of the city of Richmond. And so they, as employees to the city, we're really are concerned, as the rest of us are, about the structure or the situation that we're in financially. And so they were trying to find ways as a group, as a coalition, and they came together to help us address our structurally unbalanced budget. And so that is, and they brought in some different nonprofits and community-based organizations. So they convened themselves separately from the city. And we don't, and unions have business partners and managers, but we still worked collaboratively with them. Once they did the polling, we had a representative, Antonio was at the meetings with Lift Up Richmond. We worked on, ballot language as well as the ordinance together. So there is no payoff, in my opinion, for Lift Up Richmond. They are trying to find ways to help address the city's structurally balanced budget, in which we encouraged them to do as we were having conversations with our unions throughout our budget development process. And they actually are not getting paid anything. As far as I know from this, the city has not cut a check. They actually have paid for the polling out of the group paid for the polling, and then the consultant to help them do this work. So that actually wasn't any city funding that got us to this place so far. So I don't know if someone from the unions or Lift Up Richmond want to add to that.
I see Kristen, raise your hand. I'll unmute you right now, Kristen.
Sure, thank you. And I think LaShonda, really covered most of what our role has been very well. But, I just wanted to add that part of our involvement is also that our union represents employees in public agencies across the entire Bay Area. And so we have been in discussions with management for a while now about the expenditure side of this, and both city staff and our city management and our union members had been having discussions about how we can deal with both the expenditure side and the revenue side. We have experience with gross receipts taxes throughout the Bay. And so that's why it was an idea that we wanted to potentially put on the table and explore if there was interest in it, because we've seen these taxes work in other cities. And also, I wanted to add that from the perspective of our members and from city employees, one of the concerns is that if there are just continued cuts and only cuts to public services, at a certain point that starts to impact the entire community, including the business community. The city's general fund pays largely for public works and for public safety services. And we can only make so many cuts to those services before it starts to have a detrimental impact on the business community and everyone else. So I think that's all I had to add.
Thank you. And just to add, someone asked or made a comment It said, but salaries aren't being reduced. And if every employee had a 5 or 10% reduction in salary, our deficit would be solved. I do want to state that while employees right now are not receiving any reduction in salaries, we have part of the conversations we're having with unions of looking at furloughs, which in essence would be a reduction in salary. And our employees have not received cost of living adjustments for years. And living in the Bay Area, as we all know, operating in the Bay Area is not inexpensive. So I just wanted to point that out also. We can go to a question from someone who has their hand raised, David.
Okay, I believe it was Hakeem first, so I will unmute Hakeem right now.
Hello there, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So it's more of a comment rather than a question.
Okay.
Right. And hello, everyone. I'm Hakeem Johnson from Chevron. Recession is not the time for adding untested and complex taxes on Richmond businesses. As you stated earlier today, gross receipt taxes are highly complex. And as we can tell from this conversation, this draft is continuing to evolve substantially. And you reaching out to businesses 3 days prior to today is definitely not enough time to understand the impacts of the ordinance. We should be looking for ways to assist community businesses to ensure that they can employ residents and contribute to the economy. We should follow Oakland's lead and postpone this ballot measure until 2022 to actively engage businesses and fully study the impact of the proposed tax. This tax is going to have a disproportionate impact on businesses with high amount of sales and low profit margins. You see that in some of the comments that are being raised. Richmond deserves a tax structure that does not put local businesses and employees at a competitive disadvantage. And rushing to adopt a draft ordinance that Oakland discarded is ignoring Richmond's unique economy and community and reduces the competitiveness of Richmond businesses. So I just want to urge staff and council to do the right thing and postpone this for better engagement. Thanks.
Thank you, Hakeem, for your comment. David, someone else who has their hand up?
Yes, Katrika had her hand up, so I will unmute you right now, Katrika.
Thanks. Thank you to the city staff for putting this meeting together. I know that in regards to the city staff, you all haven't had a whole lot of time to even go through this yourselves. Just a quick question. On the current business license fees that are being collected, does the finance group know the dollar amount that's outstanding right now that has not been paid?
I don't have that number in front of me. And you're referring to businesses that have expired business licenses, for example?
No, I'm talking about the current business license ordinance. How much of that money has not been collected yet?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I don't know how else to, okay,
yeah.
So the city right now has a business license fee, correct?
Right, I mean.
Based on number of employees. So each business has to pay, is it in December when they pay their current rates? About
80% of the businesses expire in December. The rest are anniversary based, so depending on when they took it out.
Yeah, so you should have in your budget, or not in your budget, but you should know of that 80% that had their business license fees due in December.
Okay.
How much of that was outstanding and has not been collected yet? For
fiscal year 1920, we actually collected a little bit above the budgeted amount.
Okay. And do you know in like 2019?
I don't have that number in front of me. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, the one question I have is because of the COVID crisis, and it appeared from your chart, which unfortunately went by so fast, I really couldn't digest it, which showed on the proposed business classes, where the majority of businesses would fall in the classes. It appears as though the medium businesses are going to take a lot of, the impact is going to be the largest on the medium-sized businesses. And I'm curious to know if those businesses, because of COVID, I'm assuming, and talking to businesses, they were hurt in these last several months and may not even have paid business license fees last year, and may have been impacted this year. Sorry, I didn't have enough coffee this morning. So I guess my point is, without knowing what the impact is on the businesses under the current plan, it's confusing how with this plan that's so extravagant, how it's going to impact the current businesses. And then secondarily, if I understand the city is in a revenue crunch, I get that, and needs to also decrease their expenses. But, you know, you've looked at raising some rates for businesses on there in the Marina Shores area and Hilltop on their properties for, you know, enlivening the neighborhood. And I think it's based on the COLA, if I'm not correct. But why not? Did you consider looking at perhaps keeping the same rates and only raising it per COLA, or, you know, like a flat increase, rather than this very extravagant plan? Sorry, it's multiple questions, but.
Okay, so on the first part, for the current business license, we're actually expecting to see a decline when the whole COVID thing. We've been surprised that renewals have continued to come in. New businesses have applied for new business licenses. So we've been doing better than expected. So we ended up the year okay on the business license side, actually above the budget amounts. So we're expecting to see a huge hit. We did not. Okay. In reference to the impact of the new ordinance on businesses, even though the chart had about the same amounts in the 3 tiers that I showed, the vast majority of the businesses are under $1 million in gross receipts. And from that, even more, the vast majority of businesses are actually under $250,000 based on sales tax data that we have. So most businesses, in general, we're talking about landscapers, a home office, stuff like that, they'll see a decrease from $234 to $100. Unless you make above $250,000, then you might see an increase. But if you make under $250,000, you'll definitely see a decrease. Really rough numbers. We have about 2,200 businesses that aren't rentals in Richmond. Of those, about 400 will probably see an increase, or would have to calculate their taxes based on gross receipt. The other ones, again, based on sales tax data, would probably pay the $100 amount. So the impact is going to be to about 400 businesses that are above $250,000 per year, especially the ones that are above $1 million per year. Yeah, I think there might have been a third part to your question.
I'm good. I'll let somebody else take the time.
David, before we go to someone else who has their hand raised, there's a few, as we were talking about Lift Up Richmond, there were a series of additional questions and comments that came up. And so I just want to share again. There was this feeling that we as the city were not being upfront and transparent about who Lift Up Richmond was. But in the very beginning of this presentation, in every PowerPoint presentation we provided to the City Council and the staff reports, we have been very transparent with who Lift Up Richmond is and our relationship with Lift Up Richmond. So once again, Lift Up Richmond is a coalition that consists of a number of our unions, as well as some of the community-based organizations. They did not come together just to look at gross receipts tax. And so they also looked at documentary transfer tax, a variety of revenue measures that could be placed on the ballot. So the 3 that rose to the top to actually poll were vacant parcel tax, gross receipts tax, and documentary transfer tax. And so I just want to state that the city also has had their own list of revenue enhancement measures that can be placed on the ballot, which included gross receipts tax model, which we've been talking about for a while, talked about vacant parcel tax, documentary transfer tax, sales tax. We also, as a city, have looked at some of the same measures. So I just wanted to make it clear that gross receipts tax was not something that came up just in the minds of Lift Up Richmond Coalition, but the city has also been thinking about shifting the model from per employee to gross receipts. It just happened that it came up in this year, and that there was a coalition that was really pushing and doing some polling behind it. So I just want to, clarify some of that. They asked how many Lift Up Richmond members actually live in Richmond. So that would be more about how many city employees that are represented by those unions live in Richmond. And I actually don't know the answer to that. We do have many city employees who are either from Richmond, live in Richmond, have a connection to Richmond, have property in Richmond, but I don't know the number to be able to answer that question. I want to say ACE or any other group is not controlling our tax policies. They were part of a coalition that came together. As I stated, the city was also looking at gross receipts tax and thinking about it and figuring out if it was a feasible thing to move forward with. So Lift Up Richmond wasn't doing anything different in terms of what moved forward than what the city of Richmond did. And we were at the table in meetings with Lift Up Richmond. So I just want to provide some clarification and on those, because a number of questions and comments came up about that. And then someone else asked, can they get copies of the slides? We will make sure those are posted to our website, and we can, after this, I think there is a way to capture everyone who registered, so we can send the PowerPoint presentation out along with the link. So we will definitely do that.
We'll definitely include it in the Finance Department webpage towards the bottom of the page. There's a section that's dedicated to this.
And this will be very similar to the PowerPoint presentation with a few extra slides that will be presented tonight to City Council. Antonio, there was a question about cannabis. This is an industry that the city pleaded for as an industry. We all know that cannabis manufacturers are not earning the revenue that was expected. Thus, the black market on cannabis is thriving. Why is the city taxing cannabis at a high rate of 5%?
That was a voter-approved rate until we decide to lower it or do something else. That's the current rate in the system if you want to be licensed and follow the regulations in the city.
Thank you. So we can go to a question for someone who has their virtual hand raised.
Okay, yes, the next person is Fred with their hand raised. We did have one question, LaShonda, that was raised as to whether this recording will be available online.
That is, I don't mind it being available also, so people can hear what the conversation was and the question and answers. So that is not a problem to me. And since we let everyone know that it would be recorded, you can let me know if for some reason that is an issue for you. Thank you.
Okay, and I will now go to Fred. Okay, Fred, you should hear me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just as part of your recommendation this evening to the council, I understand that Councilmember Willis is a member of ACCE, and that ACCE is working with the Lift Up group. Would it be appropriate to ask Councilmember Willis to recuse himself from the vote this evening?
That is a question for our city attorney. So I'm not able to answer that question for you.
Are you able to make that question to the city attorney since he's not present?
I definitely can share that it was a question that came up. Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No problem. Were there anyone else's hand that's up?
There are no others right now.
Okay. I'm going to go back to some of the questions. I tried my best to pull and capture the questions from the chat. So I may have missed something. And if I did, I ask that whoever posed the question that we did not answer to raise your hand. Let's see. One was, Antonio, if you could clarify, there was 4.9 million stated on one of your slides as revenue, but there's also a number of 7.9 in the proposed ballot language. Can you explain the difference, please?
Sure. The 4.9 corresponds to the revenue on top of what we currently budget, on top of what we currently, so that would be new revenue. So we're currently at anywhere between 3 or 3.5. We'd be closer to above 8 if this happened to pass.
So difference between net and total.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. Someone asked about outreach. So what is the outreach that is happening? Is this it? This is the beginning of the outreach. And so we try to, we wanted to have an initial conversation, as stated, with the council and the chamber because of the number of businesses that they help represent, to get some feedback from them about should we have a meeting, and if so, what was the best time? And so that was our initial meeting. You know, we did our best to get the word out about this meeting, and we will, you know, I'll be looking to see what type of direction council gives us tonight, whether that is to pull it off and have it come back to city council for a later date in the future, whether that's next week or later for a different ballot. And we will continue to have conversations with the business community. So if people have ideas, recommendations about outreach. I know someone mentioned, since we have addresses for our business community, if we have future meetings, to make sure we mail out a mailer, definitely is a really great recommendation. We've done that before for various things. We can do that. So if people have additional comments, recommendations, we really are open to hear those. Let's see. Like I said, I may have missed some questions. There was lots of comments and questions. I tried to pull them. Does anyone that asked the question on the chat that I did not answer or was not answered by someone else's question want to raise their hand and ask their question? I don't want to we don't want to not be responsive. Someone says, how did you come up with your increased revenue numbers?
Okay, so the increased revenue numbers are basically an estimate based on sales tax data. So if you pay the state of California for sales tax, we have that data on a per business basis. We try to identify what category or class you would come into. Then based on the amount of sales tax data, what tier you would be into, then we calculate it based on that. So if you don't pay sales tax, you provide services, you wouldn't be captured in this estimate. So this is just for estimate based on businesses that pay sales tax. That's the only information we have right now.
All right, and I believe Katrinka raised her hand.
Yes, Katrinka, I will unmute you right now. Okay, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, I am. Thanks. You might have answered the question, but if a business has falls into multiple classes, how do they calculate their rate under this proposed plan? For example, they have Omega Lighting asked me this question. Their headquarters is in Richmond. They do retail, wholesale, and they also do construction work. So how would they estimate their business rate?
Okay, just to be clear, this is for revenue generated out of Richmond. They don't have another location somewhere else. So revenue generated in Richmond. Yes. If you're only having one class, one business license, it would be the main category for your business. Now, I believe it's possible to have more than one business license if you have sort of like separate entities or something, or separate segments. But the simple answer is the main business that would go into that with the largest one, where you get most of the revenue.
Katrinka, do you have a follow-up, or are you okay with that response? I don't hear anything.
Hi, Katrinka, I just...
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, the question, I'm not sure that answers my question, because according to the ordinance, it says that you need to calculate the business tax based on all of the classes, and then the class that produces the highest rate, which would be headquarters, that's what they would have to use as their business license rate.
Definitely look at it more and provide information later on, but that's...
It appears that that might be a place for clarity for us in an ordinance update.
It's a huge thing because, yeah. if you're trying to figure out what's the impact on my business and it's confusing and you're like, okay, yeah, you know, so we need more direction.
I can understand, and we will work on that. Thank you for bringing that lack of clarity to our attention. David, is there anyone else who has their hand raised?
There are no others right now with their hand raised.
Okay. So someone asked, so how are you proving your gross receipts from your taxes? Antonio, can you talk about that?
Okay. We're still working on that part. I believe other cities require that you submit your part of your tax paperwork that has a gross receipt segment. What other cities do, they spot audit certain businesses. Would they actually go to the business and look at the paperwork on site? So we're looking at what other cities are doing to implement that part.
And this is also part of why we're giving ourselves, per the ordinance as written, time for implementation and the flexibility for council to push that implementation out if we need to determine how best to implement the ordinance. I see that someone has their hand raised.
Yes, Stacy has her hand raised. I will unmute you right now, Stacy.
Hi, yeah, I just asked that question. So in going over our paperwork to prove our gross receipts, we do business in and out of Richmond. We have actually 5 corporations out of 1 home office in Richmond, but the properties that we do business are actually some of them are out of the area. So would we just give a breakdown? Because it's all, as of right now, I believe from our accountant, that it's all lumped together. So how would we, I mean, it's awfully confusing.
That is very confusing, and most cities have that same issue, that have gross receipts. And those are really the most complicated issues that we have. And they ask, and we would ask for a breakdown. Hopefully, you know, maybe the first year is gonna be the hardest. Going after that, then it hopefully gets easier, where you do break out where your revenue is generated in the tax paperwork that we would use to verify the revenue generated in Richmond. But that's an issue all cities with gross receipts encounter.
Okay, and just a statement from North Richmond Properties Incorporated. We are opposed to this. It's going to affect our properties. It's going to affect our tenants. Our tenants are asking for reductions in rent already. I understand that you have to implement funding, but this just feels like a big money grab in haste. So I just want to make that statement.
Thank you, Stacy, for your question. Also for showing us areas in which we, based on your question, that we need to maybe provide additional clarity in terms of how the ordinance would be implemented. And thank you for your statement. We have, I'm hoping that I asked all the questions that were provided. And if no one has their hand up, we actually can close the meeting. And if there are additional questions, comments that you want to share with us, areas of clarity, that we need to be looking at, that things are unclear, we really are open, welcoming of that input and feedback. We see Hakeem has his hand raised, so I'll get to that in one second. But we just really want to thank everyone for their time, and are really, and I truly mean this, we really do want to hear from the business community. We all, please tune into the city council meeting tonight. It starts at 6:30. There are directions for how to sign up to speak, to share your comments. And so we encourage you to do that for the item. It's hard to say when it'll actually be up for a discussion from city council. Someone did ask, and we've had a lot of, if it's, the sense that this feels rushed, that there's not enough time, there hasn't been enough input and dialogue and conversation with the business community, that we just need to do additional work on it. We respect all of that feedback and those comments, and it really will be up to city council tonight to make a decision on how they want us to move forward. We are bringing it back per council direction from last Tuesday, but we will be listening to what direction council provides us tonight, which will determine how we move forward. So I will allow Hakeem I will let you can have the final question or comment, and then unless there's anything else, we will sign off. So go ahead, Hakeem.
Hey, thank you. So based on this conversation today, it's clear that businesses and staff have, feel like this has been is a rush project, and so would it be possible to have maybe a third option on the council on the agenda, right? You have to adopt the resolution or postpone with the intent of placing it on the ballot measure in November. But throughout this dialogue, it's been about there's a flexibility to adjust rates and having an ongoing dialogue after it passes, right? So why not do the homework first and work on it later? I don't see the rush when there's businesses who are still trying to understand what these impacts are, and conversations, there's still going to be changes, it seems like, to what the draft is going to be proposed tonight. So a lot of folks aren't understanding what this is going to look like, and council will also be potentially frustrated as well. So maybe there's an opportunity to add a third one to say postpone to allow sufficient engagement. But I do want to thank you all for your time and your efforts, and you've been doing a great job addressing questions that we've all been raising.
And thank you. I think that is a really good note to end on. Unfortunately, we can't change the recommended action because the agenda has been posted, and Brown Act requires, there are certain requirements in terms of how we need to post and agendize items and recommended action. So that's what's going forward tonight to council. However, it is our intent to capture the essence of the comments made tonight or today during this call. Council has also received feedback, which to me has been consistent based on what I've seen in terms of asking for a postponement of this and not placing it on the November ballot. So council will hear from us. We'll provide them with the update they asked us to provide them with. So we're coming back with the ordinance. And we will share what we heard, and they also will have the benefit of hearing directly tonight at council or from emails and other correspondence that's been provided to them over the past week for them to make a very different decision based on that's different than what has been recommended. So it's up to the council to make that decision about how we move forward. But I thank everyone. I thank Hakeem. I thank you for your comment. I thank you everyone for once again taking an hour and a half out of your Tuesday morning. For those who are going to be participating tonight, thank you in advance for doing that and sharing your thoughts and feedback to council. And I just want to end with saying we do care. It's Richmond. We do care about our businesses, our business community. We have an Office of Economic Development that really focuses on supporting our business community. And so we want to make sure we continue to do that and work in collaboration and coordination with you all. And just thank you again for your honest feedback, not holding anything back and providing us with your comments and questions and time. So with that,
sorry,
go ahead.
We had a last few questions about where we can find a link to the recording.
Okay, yes. So what we'll do, because everyone registered and they provided email information, we will send out an email to everyone who registered. I believe, David, we can do that, letting them know where they can find not only the link to the recording, but the PowerPoint presentation and any other documents that we've posted online for review onto the city's website. So we'll provide you with that information, and we'll also send out an email to make sure that the Council of Industry, the chambers, and some of those associations have that information as well, in case you go to them to get information. And we are available. And we will also post or email the link to the City Council meeting so that you can know how to share your comments, either sign up to make a comment via telephone or to submit your comments before council tonight. All right. Thank you all again for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.